The silence after Claire was not like the silence before. Before, silence had a hum, the faint shuffle of her slippers on the kitchen floor, the clink of her wedding ring against her coffee cup, the quiet sigh she made when she read the morning paper. Now, it was hollow, the kind of silence that seeped into the walls and made the air feel heavier. It was late afternoon in Boston, overcast skies pressing low over the neighborhood. I sat in the armchair facing the front window, watching a street that seemed to belong to a different world. Outside, kids were chasing a ball, a dog barked somewhere down the block, but none of it crossed the glass. Since the funeral, I hadn't left the house much. Visitors had tapered off, and now all that remained was the stack of condolence cards on the dining table. I couldn't bring myself to put them away. Doing so felt like closing another door on her. That was where I found the note, in this chair a few days after she was gone. It wasn't addressed to me and it wasn't signed, but I knew her handwriting instantly, the slant of her letters, the way she looped the Y. The note read, "Don't give this to Daniel until he's ready to understand." Inside the envelope with the note was a small cold metal key. Stamped on it was the number 214. I knew immediately what it belonged to. Claire kept certain things locked away in a safe in the basement, but the key I knew was different. This one was to something I hadn't seen before. Daniel is our only child. He's 32 now, living in Denver. Our relationship has always been complicated. No shouting matches, no public blow-ups, just a distance, a kind of invisible wall we never found a way to climb over. Claire had been the bridge between us. Without her, the gap felt wider than ever. When I read her note, a knot formed in my stomach. My first instinct was to obey her, to protect her wishes, but I also felt a sting of resentment. Why would she keep something from him, and why make me the gatekeeper? The next morning, I went down to the basement. The old wooden steps creaked under my weight, and the single bulb hanging from a wire cast weak yellow light that left shadows trembling on the walls. Behind a shelf of dusty boxes stood the metal cabinet where the safe was hidden. I slid the key in. It clicked open with a crisp metallic snap. Inside was a small worn blue velvet box. I lifted it as if it might break in my hands. When I opened it, I saw a necklace, delicate gold with a pendant shaped like a leaf, and matching earrings. They were beautiful, but not in the way of expensive jewelry that shouts for attention. The beauty here was quieter, older. I had no idea where they came from or why she'd kept them from Daniel. I put the box back, locked the safe and tucked the key away again. I told myself I'd honor her request. I wouldn't tell him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But secrets have a strange way of refusing to stay still, and this one was already shifting in the dark. 3 weeks passed before Daniel called. I had been expecting something sooner, but my son has always handled grief in his own way, usually by keeping busy, by not talking about it. I knew he was back at work in Denver, throwing himself into deadlines and meetings, pretending the world hadn't just shifted under his feet. When I saw his name flash on my phone, I hesitated before answering. It was a stupid pause, but it was there. That old reflex of bracing myself before we spoke, as if every conversation might turn into an awkward negotiation. "Hey, Dad," he said when I picked up. His voice was steady, but I could hear the slight rasp, the kind that comes from holding back too much. "Hey," I said, gripping the armrest of my chair. "How are you holding up?" There was a pause on his end. "I'm trying. Listen, I was going through some of Mom's things you sent over, and I think something's missing." My stomach tightened. Missing? Yeah, her jewelry box, the one she kept in her dresser. "She didn't have much jewelry in there," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. "Mostly costume pieces." "I know, but there was one set she always wore at Thanksgiving, gold with that little leaf pendant. I can't find it anywhere." I could picture the necklace instantly. I had seen it around Claire's neck countless times, though never thought of it as part of some special tradition. Now I understood. This was the set in the velvet box, the one she had hidden from him. "I don't remember seeing that," I lied. The words came too easily, and I hated how quickly they left my mouth. Daniel exhaled sharply, the kind of sound that meant he was choosing his battles. "All right. Maybe I'll check some other boxes when I come out there next month. After we hung up, I sat for a long time staring at the safe in my mind's eye. The velvet box, the note. Don't give this to Daniel until he's ready. What did ready even mean? Ready to forgive, ready to remember, ready to face something he didn't know. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain outside was soft, steady, like someone tapping gently at the windows. My mind drifted back to the week before Claire died, to the way she had held my hand and asked me, no, told me, to take care of something for her. I need you to promise me, Robert, she had whispered. Don't give him the necklace unless you're sure. I had promised without asking why. Now I was starting to wish I had asked. In the dim hours before dawn, I went back to the basement. I didn't open the safe, I just stood in front of it. I don't know if I was guarding it or if it was guarding me. Daniel didn't call again for 2 weeks. In that time, I moved the key from its hiding place in the desk drawer to the inside pocket of my jacket. I told myself it was for safekeeping, but the truth was I didn't like the idea of it being too far from me. It was as if the key wasn't just metal, it was a weight I could feel against my chest, a reminder of a choice I still hadn't made. One grey Thursday morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee when I knocked over an old stack of mail on the counter. Envelopes slid to the floor, scattering like leaves. Among them was one I didn't recognize, cream-colored with my name written in Claire's looping script. My breath caught. I sat at the table and held it for a long time before sliding my finger under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded in thirds. I began to unfold it, then stopped. Something in me resisted. I don't know if it was fear of what it might say, or fear of learning something that would make keeping the secret impossible. I slipped the letter back into the envelope, placed it in the top drawer of the kitchen hutch and closed it. Not now. Not yet. That afternoon, I went for a walk. My first real walk around the neighborhood since the funeral. The air smelled of wet pavement, and the trees were bare, their branches like black veins against the pale sky. I passed Mrs. Keating's house. She was on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, and waved at me. "Haven't seen you out much, Robert," she said. "How are you holding up?" I gave the kind of polite answer people give when they don't want to talk. She nodded, the way people do when they understand you're carrying more than you can explain in a quick exchange. When I got home, there was a voicemail from Daniel. "Dad, I've been thinking about Mum's necklace. I know you said you didn't see it, but I'm sure it was important to her. If you find it, just let me know. No questions, okay?" No questions. That's what he said. But there were already questions hanging between us, thick as the winter air. That night I dreamed of Claire. She was standing in the basement, holding the velvet box in one hand and the necklace in the other. She didn't speak, but she looked at me with that quiet insistence I had seen in her before, the look that said she trusted me to do something hard. When I woke up, the image was still there, sharp and unshaken. I went to the kitchen, pulled open the hutch drawer and took out the envelope with her letter. This time I was ready to read it, or so I thought. I sat at the table with the envelope in front of me, the morning light spreading across the wood like a slow spill. The coffee in my cup had gone cold. My fingers felt clumsy as I slid the letter out again. It wasn't long, just 3 short paragraphs written in Claire's neat, steady hand. "Robert, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. There are things about the necklace I never told you, because I didn't want them to weigh on you while I was still here. It belonged to Daniel's grandmother, not your mother, but the woman who raised him for the first 5 years of his life." I stopped reading. The words felt wrong. Daniel's grandmother. He'd only had one grandmother, my mother, and she had died before he was born. My chest tightened. I kept reading. "Before you and I met, I made mistakes. I was young, frightened, and I gave Daniel to my cousin Margaret for a time. She raised him like her own until I was able to take him back. The necklace was hers. She told me to give it to Daniel when he was ready to know where he really comes from. I didn't have the courage to tell him myself. My hands were trembling now. The letter continued. "Please, Robert, be patient. This will hurt him, but it's the truth. He deserves to know it, just not all at once, not while the wound is fresh." Give him the necklace when you believe he can carry the weight of the story without breaking under it. It was signed simply, Love, Claire. I set the letter down and leaned back in the chair, the room suddenly too small, the air too thin. The refrigerator hummed in the corner, the only sound. Claire had never told me any of this. In all our years together, she had kept this piece of her life sealed away. And now, she had handed me the responsibility of revealing it, or not. I thought about Daniel as a boy, his quiet eyes, the way he sometimes looked at me like I was a stranger even in our own home. Had he always felt the gap? Had some part of him known that something in his history didn't add up? The necklace was no longer just a piece of jewelry, it was a doorway. And on the other side was a truth that could change everything between us. That night, I couldn't bring myself to eat dinner. I sat in the living room with the lights off, holding the letter and listening to the wind rattle against the windows. When the phone rang, I nearly jumped. It was Daniel. "Dad," he said, "I booked my ticket. I'll be there in 2 weeks." 2 weeks. That was all the time I had left before the truth would be sitting across from me at my own table. The days leading up to Daniel's visit felt like a countdown clock had been set somewhere inside the house. Every sound, the ticking of the kitchen clock, the creak of the floorboards, seemed sharper, as if the air itself was keeping time. I tried to go about my days as usual, morning coffee, reading the paper, aimless tidying, but the letter was never far from my thoughts. I had moved it to the top drawer of my nightstand, folded neatly back in its envelope. Every night before bed, I would open the drawer, take it out, and stare at her handwriting. Sometimes I read it again, sometimes I just held it, as if the paper itself could answer the questions she'd left behind. I wondered if Daniel suspected something beyond the missing necklace. In our brief calls, he was polite but distant, a tone I knew well. He asked about the weather in Boston, about whether I needed anything from the store, but underneath I sensed a quiet searching, as if he was listening for something I wasn't saying. One evening I went down to the basement and opened the safe again. The velvet box was exactly as I had left it. I lifted the necklace into my hand, letting the chain run between my fingers. The gold was warm, as if it had been waiting for me. The leaf pendant caught the light from the bare bulb above, and for a moment I imagined Margaret, the woman who had worn it before Claire, the woman who had been a mother to my son before I ever was his father. What did Daniel remember of her? Claire's letter suggested he had been 5 when she took him back, but she had never told me the details. I tried to picture him at that age, a boy small enough to still need help tying his shoes, yet old enough to have memories he might carry buried deep. The temptation to call him and tell him everything now was strong, to unload the burden before his arrival, to let the shock happen over the phone where I wouldn't have to see his face. But that felt cowardly. If I was going to tell him, it had to be in person. 2 nights before his arrival, I dreamed of the airport. I was standing at the arrivals gate, watching passengers stream out, but I couldn't find Daniel among them. The crowd kept moving, but the doors never closed. I woke with a start, my heart pounding. In the dream, I had been holding the necklace in my hand. When I woke, I realized I was clutching the edge of my blanket the same way. I got up, went to the kitchen, and made tea I didn't really want. The house was still, the kind of stillness that presses against your ears until you can hear your own breathing. In 2 days, the stillness would be broken, and so would the secret, one way or another. The morning Daniel arrived, Boston was wrapped in a wet fog that clung to everything, the kind of damp cold that seeps through your coat no matter how tightly you pull it around you. I left early for Logan Airport, the road slick with a fine drizzle. The drive felt longer than it should have, each mile a slow pull toward something I wasn't ready for. I parked in the short-term lot and walked into the terminal, scanning the crowd near the baggage claim. When I finally spotted him, I recognized the slope of his shoulders before I saw his face. He had the same dark hair as Claire, though now it was shorter, neater, and dusted at the edges with grey. His expression was unreadable, not angry, not warm, just neutral. "Hey, Dad," he said, setting his bag down. "Hey," I replied, my voice sounding rougher than I intended. We shook hands, then, after an awkward pause, embraced briefly. It was the kind of hug you give someone you see once or twice a year, polite, careful, over too soon. On the drive home, we talked about his flight, the weather in Denver, traffic on the pike, all the easy, safe things. He didn't mention the necklace, and I didn't bring it up, but the air between us carried the weight of it, like a third passenger in the car. When we reached the house, he stood in the living room for a moment, looking around. "Doesn't feel the same without her," he said quietly. "No," I admitted. "It doesn't." We settled into a rhythm over the next day, coffee in the morning, errands in the afternoon, dinner at the kitchen table. There were stretches of silence, but not uncomfortable ones. Sometimes he'd glance at the mantel where a framed photo of Claire still sat, her smile caught forever in that summer sunlight. The second night after his arrival, we were sitting in the living room when he finally said it. "Dad, I know about the necklace." I froze. "What do you mean?" "I know you have it. I found the empty spot in Mom's dresser before you shipped her things, and I saw you hesitate when I asked about it on the phone." He leaned back in the chair, his eyes fixed on mine. "I don't know why you're keeping it from me, but I think I deserve to know." My mouth went dry. The truth was, a stone lodged in my throat, too heavy to swallow, too sharp to spit out. "It's not that simple," I said finally. "It never is," he replied, his tone flat but not angry. He didn't push further that night, but I knew the moment had shifted. We were no longer just father and son sharing a house. We were two people circling a secret, waiting to see who would break first. The next morning, Daniel was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs. He'd made coffee, 2 mugs sitting on the counter, his way of extending a peace offering without words. "Morning," I said. He nodded, handing me a cup. "I was thinking of going through the basement today. Mom kept a lot of boxes down there, right?" The basement. My stomach tightened. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Mostly old papers, holiday decorations, that sort of thing." "Still," he said, sipping his coffee, "it might be nice to see what's there." We didn't talk about the necklace again, but the subject was everywhere, woven into the pauses in our conversation. I felt like the walls of the house were leaning in, listening. By mid-morning, he was pulling dusty boxes off the shelves downstairs. I lingered near the doorway, pretending to help by sorting through a stack of photo albums. Every time he turned his back, my eyes flicked toward the safe in the corner, hidden behind a row of storage bins. At one point, he found a stack of Claire's old recipe cards. "She made these the year I went to college," he said, thumbing through them. "Said it was so I wouldn't starve." He smiled faintly, then the smile faded. "Guess I never really thought about how much she held things together for us." I wanted to tell him. Right there, surrounded by the dust and the smell of old wood, I wanted to hand him the key, the letter, and let the truth spill out. But something in me still resisted, the same something that had kept Claire silent all those years. That night after dinner, he went for a walk. I stayed in the living room, staring at the envelope on the coffee table, Claire's letter, now out in the open as if daring me to put it in his hands. When he returned, he didn't sit down. He stood by the window looking out into the dark. "Do you ever feel like there's something you were supposed to be told but no one ever said it?" I froze. "What do you mean?" He shrugged without turning around. "Sometimes I get this feeling. Like my life has pieces missing, it's probably nothing." But it wasn't nothing. He was circling the truth without knowing it, and I was the one holding the missing piece. That night, I dreamed of a little boy, dark-haired, standing in a yard I didn't recognize. He was looking up at a woman who wasn't Claire, but who was bending down to fasten a necklace around his neck. The leaf pendant glinted in the sunlight. When I woke, I could still see the boy's eyes. They were Daniel's eyes. 2 days into his visit, the basement became his main project. Every morning after breakfast, he'd disappear down the creaky stairs, and I'd hear the muffled thump of boxes being moved, lids being pried open, the scrape of cardboard against concrete. On the 3rd morning, I went down to bring him a cup of coffee. He was on the far side of the basement, kneeling in front of the storage bins that hid the safe. My pulse quickened. "What's back here?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. "Just old office supplies, I think," I said, forcing a casual tone. "Stuff we never threw out." He pulled one bin forward, then another, and the corner of the safe came into view, matte grey metal, unassuming unless you knew what it was. "Did you and Mom keep important papers in here?" he asked, standing up. "Sometimes," I replied. My voice sounded too measured, and I knew he noticed. He brushed the dust off the door and ran his fingers over the lock. "Does it still work?" "I suppose," I said. "Haven't opened it in a while." "You got the key." The question hung between us like a trap. I could feel the letter in my pocket. I'd started carrying it along with the key, as if keeping them close might keep them safe. "I'm not sure where it is," I lied. "Might be in one of Claire's desk drawers." He studied me for a long moment, and I could almost hear the machinery in his head turning. But then he stepped back, letting the safe remain closed. We carried a few boxes upstairs together, but the image of his hands on the safe stayed with me all day. That night, as he showered, I went down to the basement alone. I moved the bins back into place, covering the safe completely. The air smelled faintly of damp concrete and dust, but underneath it all there was another scent, faint, floral, like Claire's perfume. I stood there in the dim light, wondering if she would approve of what I was doing, or if she would tell me I was making a mistake. When I came back upstairs, Daniel was at the kitchen table, towel draped around his neck, looking through an old photo album. "Some of these I don't remember," he said, turning the book toward me. In one picture, he was about 4 years old, sitting on a woman's lap. Her face was turned away, so only the side of her hair was visible. "Who's that?" he asked. I stared at the image, the answer caught in my throat. "A family friend," I said finally. He didn't question me, but his eyes lingered on the photo a little longer before he turned the page. The next morning, Daniel didn't go straight to the basement. He sat at the kitchen table instead, stirring his coffee in slow, deliberate circles. I could feel something coming, the kind of tension that hums just under the surface before it breaks. "Dad," he began, eyes fixed on the mug, "were there ever things about Mom's life she didn't tell me?" I kept my face still. Everyone has things they keep to themselves. I'm not talking about little things. I mean big things, things that would change how I see everything. The air in the kitchen seemed to shrink. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because," he said, finally looking at me, "every time I bring up that necklace, you act like you've swallowed a nail. And I've been finding pictures, ones I don't remember being taken, people I don't recognize, places I don't think I've been." I set my coffee down. "What exactly are you saying?" He exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. "I'm saying I think Mom had a past I don't know about, and I think you do know. And I think that necklace has something to do with it." There it was, the shape of the truth, sketched out between us. I wanted to tell him. I could almost feel the words pressing against my teeth. But then I pictured Claire lying in that hospital bed, her hand in mine, her voice low and certain. "Don't give it to him until he's ready." "What if you're not ready?" I asked. His eyes narrowed. "You don't get to decide that for me." The words hit harder than I expected. I looked down at the table, tracing the grain of the wood with my thumb. He stood, pushing his chair back. "I'm going to get some air." When the door closed behind him, I went to my jacket and pulled out the envelope and the key. I held them both, feeling the cool metal in one hand and the soft paper in the other. Two halves of the same secret. By the time he returned, the items were back in my pocket. We didn't speak for the rest of the evening, but I could feel the distance between us widening, as if the house itself had split down the middle. That night the dream came again. The boy in the yard, the woman fastening the necklace around his neck. Only this time, when she looked up, I saw her face clearly. It was Margaret, and she was smiling at me. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. The fog outside was thick enough to blur the street, the kind of weather that made the world feel smaller. Daniel had gone back down to the basement after lunch. I tried to read in the living room, but every thump and scrape from below sounded like an alarm bell. When he came back up, he was holding something in his hand, a photograph, its edges curled with age. "Who is this?" he asked. I looked at the picture. It was Margaret standing in a sunlit yard with a little boy in front of her. Her hands rested gently on his shoulders. The boy was grinning, his hair slightly messy, his cheeks round with youth. It was Daniel. "You look about 4 there," I said carefully. "Yeah, but I don't remember this woman. I don't remember this place." His voice was tight. "Was she a babysitter? A relative?" I swallowed. "She was family." "Family?" His eyes narrowed. "Why didn't Mom ever talk about her?" I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The letter was still in my pocket, as it had been every day since I found it. My hand drifted toward it without thinking, but I stopped short. Daniel studied me for a long moment, his expression shifting from curiosity to something harder, suspicion, maybe even hurt. "You know something," he said quietly. I didn't answer. The silence between us was loud, almost physical. He set the photograph on the coffee table and stepped back. "If you won't tell me, I'll find out myself." That night, he stayed in his room after dinner. The door closed. I sat alone in the kitchen with the letter in front of me. I read it again, slowly, letting each word weigh me down. Claire's handwriting was steady, her instructions clear. "Be patient. Tell him when he's ready." But what if ready never came? What if waiting was just another way of running from the truth? The house felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that comes from inside, not from the weather. I thought about going to his room, knocking, and handing him both the key and the letter. But I didn't. Instead, I put the necklace in my jacket pocket. For the first time, it wasn't locked away in the basement. It was with me, where I could feel its weight. In 2 days, Daniel would be flying back to Denver. Time was running out, and I knew I couldn't keep this up. The only question was whether the truth would come from me or from somewhere else. The next evening, I heard his footsteps coming up from the basement, slow but deliberate. When Daniel stepped into the living room, he wasn't holding a photograph this time. He was holding the key. "I found it," he said, his voice low. "In Mom's sewing kit. Guess you didn't look there." My chest tightened. "Daniel," he held up a hand. "Don't. I want to open the safe. Now." The room felt suddenly smaller. The shadows in the corners seemed to press closer. I thought about refusing, but the look in his eyes told me that would be pointless. We went down to the basement. The air was cool, faintly musty. Daniel moved the bins aside and crouched in front of the safe. His hands didn't shake when he slid the key in. The click of the lock was louder than I remembered. When the door swung open, the velvet box was there, exactly where I'd left it. Daniel lifted it out slowly, as though it might break apart. He opened it and stared at the necklace. "I've seen this before," he said almost to himself. "I just don't remember where." He looked up at me. "Why was it in here? Why wasn't it in Mom's jewelry box?" I pulled the envelope from my pocket and held it out. "Because she wanted me to give you this first." He took it, glanced at my handwriting on the front, then slid the letter out. His eyes moved quickly at first, then slowed. By the time he reached the second paragraph, his face had changed. The lines in his forehead deepening, his mouth tightening. When he finished, he let the letter fall to his lap. "She gave me away." His voice cracked on the last word. "She was young," I said quietly. "She didn't have the means to take care of you then. Margaret loved you, took care of you. Claire took you back when she could." He shook his head, staring at the floor. "And you've known this, how long?" "Only since she passed. She left the letter for me. Asked me to wait until you were ready." "Ready?" He let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. "I'm 32, Dad. If I'm not ready now, when? What exactly were you protecting me from?" I didn't answer. The truth was, I didn't know anymore. Daniel closed the velvet box, gripping it tightly. "I don't know if I can forgive her," he said, his voice trembling. "And I don't know if I can forgive you." The words hit me like a physical blow. He didn't look at me when he walked upstairs, leaving me alone with the open safe and the cold air pressing in. The house was quiet the next morning, but it wasn't the comfortable kind of quiet. It was the kind that has edges, the kind you feel before you hear. Daniel didn't come down for breakfast. I made coffee, poured 2 mugs out of habit and left his on the counter. Hours passed before I heard him moving around upstairs. When he finally appeared, He had the velvet box in his hand. "I'm flying home tomorrow," he said. His voice was steady, but there was no softness in it. "You were supposed to stay until Thursday," I said. "Plans change." He set the box on the table between us. "I don't want this. Not now." I looked at the box, then at him. It was hers, and Margaret's before her. "It's part of your story." "Yeah," he said bitterly. "A story nobody bothered to tell me." I didn't try to defend myself. Every argument I could make felt like an excuse, and excuses were useless now. We spent most of the day in separate rooms. I tried reading, but the words on the page blurred. I kept thinking about the years I had with Daniel. The school plays, the baseball games, the quiet dinners, all of them layered over this secret neither of us knew I was holding. By late afternoon, I found him in the living room, staring at the photo of Claire on the mantel. "She should have told me," he said, not turning around. "I know." My voice caught. "And I should have told you as soon as I found out." He finally faced me, his eyes tired. "Why didn't you?" "Because I was afraid," I said simply. "Afraid it would hurt you more than it helped you. Afraid it would make you hate her. Maybe hate me." He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "I don't know how to feel right now. Part of me wants to get on that plane and never come back, and part of me wants to ask you everything, every detail you know." "Then ask," I said, almost whispering. He shook his head. "Not tonight." That night I heard him moving in his room long after midnight. I sat in my own room with the necklace in my hand, the chain pooled in my palm like water. I wondered if giving it back to the safe would be easier than giving it back to him, but I didn't put it away. It was just after midnight when I heard the knock on my bedroom door. Soft, almost hesitant. "Dad?" Daniel's voice was low. I sat up. "Yeah? Can we talk?" He came in and sat on the edge of the chair by the window, his elbows resting on his knees. For a while, he didn't look at me. "I've been lying here thinking," he said finally. "If I leave tomorrow without asking, I'll just keep imagining things, and maybe the truth's worse in my head than it is in reality." I nodded slowly. "Ask me what you want to know." He took a breath. "Did Mom love Margaret?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Not the way she loved me, but she trusted her, and she loved how Margaret cared for you." He looked down at his hands. "And Margaret, did she love me?" "She did," I said. "She raised you as if you were hers. For 5 years, she was the only mother you knew." His jaw tightened. "So when Mum took me back, what did that do to her?" I swallowed. "It broke her. But she let you go, because she believed you belonged with your mother." Daniel's eyes were wet now, though he blinked hard. "I don't remember her face. I remember a smell, like lavender, but I can't see her." "That's her perfume," I said quietly. "She wore it every day." We sat in silence for a while. Then he asked, "Why the necklace?" "It was Margaret's," I said. "She gave it to your mother with one condition, that it be passed to you when you were ready to know the truth. Claire couldn't bring herself to tell you while she was alive, so she left it for me to do." He leaned back, running a hand over his face. "And you almost didn't." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "Not because I didn't think you deserved to know, but because I didn't know if I could watch the hurt in your face. I didn't want you to think your whole life was a lie." He was quiet for a long time, staring out the dark window. Finally, he said, "I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about her, about either of them." "You don't have to decide tonight," I said. He nodded, then stood. At the door, he paused. "Keep the necklace for now. I'm not ready to wear it. But don't put it back in the safe." When the door closed, I sat there in the dark with the necklace in my hand. It felt lighter somehow, though nothing about it had changed. Daniel's flight was in the early afternoon. We didn't talk much while getting ready. The quiet between us wasn't hostile anymore, but it wasn't easy either. There was a weight to it, like the air before a storm. On the drive to Logan, he stared out the passenger window, the skyline of Boston muted by winter haze. I wanted to say something that would close the space between us. But every phrase felt too small. Halfway there, he spoke without turning his head. I don't think Mom was a bad person. I think she was scared. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. She was, and she carried that fear her whole life. He nodded slowly. Maybe I'm scared too. Scared to know what else I don't remember. Scared I'll start seeing my childhood differently. I glanced at him. However you see it, it's still yours. It doesn't erase the good memories. At the terminal, I pulled over to the drop-off lane. He got out, slinging his bag over his shoulder. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the photograph of himself with Margaret, the one he'd found in the basement. "You keep this," he said, handing it to me. "For now." I took it carefully, my thumb brushing over the curled edge. "I'll keep it safe." He gave a small nod, then stepped closer. We hugged, longer than at the arrivals gate, and not as stiff. When he pulled back, his voice was low. "I'll call you." I watched him walk toward the sliding glass doors, swallowed by the tide of travelers. On the drive home, the city blurred past without me really seeing it. When I got back, I placed the photograph on the mantel beside Claire's picture. For the first time, the two of them were side by side, not as rivals in his story, but as two women who had loved him in their own ways. That night, I didn't put the necklace away. I left it on the kitchen table, its gold catching the faint light from the window. It wasn't mine to hide anymore. A week after Daniel left, a small package arrived in the mail. The handwriting on the label was his, neat, deliberate. Inside was the velvet box. No note, no explanation. I sat at the kitchen table and opened it. The necklace lay inside, the leaf pendant glinting in the winter light. For a long time, I just stared at it, listening to the house breathe around me. I thought of Margaret fastening it around a little boy's neck in a sunlit yard. I thought of Claire wearing it at Thanksgiving, her hand brushing the pendant when she laughed. And I thought of Daniel holding it in the basement, his face shifting as the truth sank in. I could have locked it away again, but instead I placed it on the mantel, beside the photograph of Claire and the one of Margaret with young Daniel. 3 pieces of the same story, no longer hidden from each other. Some nights I catch myself talking to Claire in the quiet. I tell her what I wish I'd said to Daniel sooner, what I hope he understands someday, that keeping the secret wasn't about doubting him, but about fearing the way the truth can wound. And maybe I'll never know if I made the right choice, waiting as long as I did. But I know this. The silence between us is different now. It's not the silence of something buried, but of something still unfolding. A few days later, my phone rang. His name lit up the screen. "Hey, Dad," he said. "I've been thinking, maybe next month you could come to Denver. We could talk more, about her, about everything." "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it. After we hung up, I looked at the necklace again. It was still here, still mine to keep for now, but no longer mine to hide. Some stories don't end. They just find a place to rest. Before you go, I need to hear from you. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you remember a moment, a secret, or a choice in your own family, share it in the comments. Your words might be the one thing another viewer needs to read today. Don't just think about it. Write it down now. And if this story meant something to you, help it reach someone else who needs it. Share it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. And when you're ready, click on the next video that's appearing on your screen. The story there might change the way you see forgiveness forever.